Well, as Shirley mentioned, I recently retired from Mosaic Family Services, a nonprofit that I founded almost 30 years ago. Um, and the work that we do there actually cover three areas of service to victims. Um, one of whom is refugee, and then we have survivor domestic violence, and lastly, and more exciting and um, wonderful work that we've done in the last probably 20 years, survivor human trafficking. So today, when I'm talking, I'm going to be sharing that's kind of a journey that I've been through and how it's all um, happened. Um, so I want to begin with a definition of a refugee because that's how I came from. Right. According to the United Nations, this is the definition of a refugee that has been um, um, shared and used by the United States as well. The 1951 Refugee Convention is the key legal document that defines a refugee as someone who is unable, unwilling to return to their country of origin, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So at Mosaic, we began our work back in uh, the early 1990s with refugees. Um, so what kind of issues or traumatic experience that refugees have had when they come to this country? But before being forced to flee, refugees may experience imprisonment, torture, loss of property, physical assault, malnutrition, and loss of livelihood. During flight, refugees are frequently robbed, raped, assaulted, or witness torture. Many continue to experience PTSD events years after resettlement. When resettled to a host country, most refugees must adapt to a place and language, to a new culture and community. And this is an example of, I would consider a traumatic experience for me and for many refugees who came to the Midwestern part of the state. And this actually happened to me when I first came. When I first came, actually, I came to to live in North Dakota. You see how cold it was there, right? So during the cold, extreme cold weather, for example, this happened to me and a lot of our refugees. To most car battery, if you park outside, would be dead. It's frozen. Couldn't start the car in the morning. So in order to start in the morning, the evening before, I had to go out and unscrew and bring my battery inside so that it's warm up there. And in the morning, I had to bring it out and put it back on there and then screw it back so that it's still warm. The oil is not frozen, so I can start the car. Um, that was crazy because early in the morning you can see how cold it's been. It's and you out there and try to put an old battery because refugee when you first came you're not well to do and can't afford. So that's very scary. Next. However, being a refugee um, has certain quality that really help them survive, become, we call them a survivor as well. That is resilient. This statement really make me, it's always rings true when you talk about refugee. This is the Kurdish person who said this, refugee. I have crossed so many rivers, I no longer get wet. And this is a Kurdish saying that identifying the prolonged exposure to traumatic experiences and the resistant or resilient of refugee. So what is resilient? Resilient is the ability to maintain relatively stable, healthy level of psychological functioning in the face of highly threatening events. It is often thought of as a process predicted by higher cognitive ability, positive self-esteem, hopefulness, problem solving, repertoire, and flexibility. I want to talk about my own refugee story. This is how it started. Due to my work as a press liaison officer for the former pro-American South Vietnamese government, the communist regime had a target on me. I had no choice but fleeing my homeland in search of freedom. How did I do that? I tried to do it by boat. After 4 unsuccessful attempts to escape, of which 3 times I was arrested and jailed in communist prison for a total of 8 months altogether. I had experienced torture, starvation, beating, and threatened with death in horrible condition of those jails. On my 5th escape, it's on a tiny boat with 32 others, was successful. We were rescued by a French boat, Le Goélo, that's the name of the boat, whose mission was to rescue both people in the South Pacific. This is a picture that shows a refugee boat. It's not my boat, it's kind of similar to a boat that I escaped on. Although this one, you see a little sail, probably they ran, the motor broke or something. So they had to put a sail, makeshift sail, in order to be able to continue to go. On the right, far right, there's a larger ship. That is the ship that actually rescued this boat right here. And which is very much the same story like mine. So I was rescued by another boat. It's called the Le Goélo. This is the picture that shows me and a number of other people that escaped with me after we were rescued by that big ship. And this was almost a 40 years old picture. So you can see it's pretty old, very hard to see, but you can still see me on the right, farther right there. The next picture is show me here in the cabin of the captain. It's pretty hot, so he didn't wear any shirt, but this is that ship that was destined to rescue refugee on the high sea of the South Pacific, and we were one of the last boats that were rescued by them. After the rescue, I was brought to a refugee camp in the Philippines. So what does life look like in the refugee camp? I spent 6 months in the refugee camp in the Philippines. It's called the Vietnamese Refugee Center in Palawan Island. There, we're waiting to be processed to be resettled in the United States or elsewhere. It depends on which country that would take whoever that would like to go to. There, I work as a camp volunteer, and I have heard so many traumatic stories of fellow refugees. Many had never made to the camp. Shipping boats were rescued and brought to the camp with half on board still alive. Next slide. This is, in this picture, you see this man. He was carrying both of his parents on his shoulder, and he's a Burmese refugee. He's from Burma, and he fled Bangladesh. He did not leave behind his parents who were unable to move. He carried them on his shoulder for 160 kilometers until he reached his destination. And so you can see the endurance, the determination, the resilience, walk, carry two people, and of course, family obligation, and what did he bring with him? His parents, and both of these are were you can see they're small, tiny, probably they were disabled, but that they brought with. After I came to the United States, and of course, I've been around a lot of in Minnesota first, and went to school there, got my master there. I moved to Texas, and I found this organization. Originally, it's called Mosaic, called East Dallas Counseling Center, and my dream was to find to create an organization that would provide the support and help to those who have been through a similar experience like mine. So this is a picture of another picture, black and white from a Dallas Morning News article. It showed my original office, and it was probably almost 30 years ago. It showed me right in the front. On the left side, there are two men. Both of those are Kurdish, because after the Indo-Chinese refugee movement came, resettlement came the Kurdish refugee, and we resettled and have the Kurdish refugee there. But we also use and hire employees who are Kurdish. And on my right side is a Vietnamese/Chinese case manager. These are the Burmese refugee that have been resettled more recently and helped by our organization. So me, two of my staff in the background. Actually, one of the case manager next to me is also from Burma, and the three ladies there were refugee from Burma. And this picture actually was taken at Toyota North, where we, Mosaic Family Services, received a grant from a group called the Orchid Circle of Giving, as part of Texas Women Foundation, and they had a ceremony. So we were able to bring some refugee there, and we had a little celebration and before the grant was given. But this is the Dallas Morning News article that came and interviewed me, and they wrote an article where this little quote from them, and it was in 2010. They said that me or Mosaic Family Services has soothed the nerves of thousands of refugees like himself for 2 decades in Dallas. So after being there for like 20 years or so, we have served and helped so many refugees, through counseling, through case management, social support, and so they came interview, did an article, which is really helpful because it helped promote our name and get us out there and get the donation and support. Let's move on to the next population that we serve, domestic violence. How did it happen? So I opened this center called Mosaic in 1993, to have struggling refugee become self-sufficient. That's what I did, and I will show something like earlier. Then came a situation that just out of nowhere, but it's so tragic. There was a court case, a court situation of domestic abuse, and then the man, for whatever reason, the abuser were able to bring a gun in, and he shot and killed his wife right at the, at the court. I mean, during those days, and so this struck me the most, and I thought that, well, we need to do something about helping refugee who are victim of domestic violence. There's a saying that that describe those from the refugee, and especially the Asian community, the women especially, they call them victim or survivor who suffer in silence, because domestic violence is a taboo subject. Therefore, nobody talk about it. Nobody would protest. Nobody would call for help. So we thought that, well, we need to do something about it. We need to do a lot of education and bring awareness and trying to get help to this population. This is a picture of the staff of Mosaic. Then probably it's around maybe 10 or 15 years ago. They were dressed in different costume that represent different culture. We have a total of then around 50 employees. Currently, I mean, before I left, we have about 75, and we represented around 20 different culture. The total languages was spoken there is roughly about 28. They dress us in different, and so these are both refugee and family violence, and some are human trafficking case manager and employees as well. So what do we do for domestic violence survivor? We provide a holistic, a whole gamut of services that include a 24 hours crisis hotline. We have access to 250 language via AT&T language line. Our staff are fluent in about 30 different languages. We provide legal services with currently like 4 attorneys and 2 legal assistants. They provide both family immigration law, because any survivor that we serve, domestic violence survivor, most people are from immigrant background or refugee background. They are facing not just family issue, but also immigration issue. That's why we have lawyers who are fluent, who proficient in both of those areas of law services. We provide professional mental health counseling and therapy, including child therapy. We have child advocacy services to help advocate for the children, help them go to school, prepare all kinds of things. Bring them to interview and get supply and all of that. We also have on-site child care services, especially at our shelter. We have a 46-bed shelter, emergency shelter for domestic violence and also for human trafficking victims, which I'm going to speak later. So and the shelter is always full. You can see the demand is there, and after all of these so-called awareness and outreach effort, we have brought in a lot of there's been a lot of people call for help, and we were able to house always full. We also have transitional housing services. For those who've been through our shelter, after they done, they're going to be moving to transitional housing before they can be on their own. in 2018, I was interviewed for an article for the New American Economy. And one of the things that I keep saying, which I think is very crucial and important in our work, is that our services are most effective when the provider understands the culture and the language of the client, because they instantly gain trust if they know you have shared their experience. And that's why our employees are former immigrants and refugees themselves, so that we have that match between the language and cultural. So we instantly have that connection. All right, let's move on to human trafficking. How did it start? We call it, trafficking services, or services for trafficking victims or survivor trafficking. We also use the term counter trafficking in person work. So how did it start? In 2000 or so, this is I want to tell a story of the case of Q Suli and the case of the Samoan sweatshop. This is how Mosaic is involved in trafficking work. There's an owner by the name of Q Suli. He's Korean. He built a garment factory in American Samoa. The name is Dewusa. It's a garment factory, and the reason he had it in the American Samoa is because he can make his the clothes and still have it called Make in America, right? It's the American territory, but it's kind of further out there, so it may escape any kind of any kind of governments or scrutiny or anything like that. He recruited workers from three groups: Vietnam, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Samoan. Anybody who want to work had to pay between $3,600 to $8,000 to be hired. When it came, and there's a picture here on the right side that shows him and the compound in the back there. That's where people live and work. He control everybody, as far as like food, what they eat. Whenever they leave the compound, they have to get permission and all of that. And there's curfew as well. People don't really, so what happened there after a short time was he received a large order from JCPenney, but had to be completed within 2 months. So in order for that work to get done, he ordered everybody to work very hard, work extra hours, and he have his guard beat people up if they do not finish on time, all of that. There was one of the workers, she's Vietnamese, her name is Nguyen. One of her eyes was gouged because they used a pipe and beat her up. And this is almost just like a story that happened in the movie called A Message in a Bottle. Some of you probably may have seen that movie. There were once of the worker there who came and visit one of the worker who were injured and was in the hospital. On the way back, she dropped an SOS note outside of the car. So somebody out there saw it, picked it up, brought it to the attention of the local authority. So they brought in the Department of Labor to do an investigation. after they saw the horrible condition, all of that, they decided, the government there decided to arrest the owner. So Lee was arrested and charged with involuntary servitude and forced labor. There was a trial that started on October 22nd, 2002, and he was convicted and sentenced to 480 months in prison and had to pay 1.8 million in restitution. Now, 480 months, when I calculated, it turned out to be about 40 years. There were 250 victims there, were rescued. And they were brought to the 20 different US states. 18 of the victims were sent to Dallas. When they were sent to Dallas, the FBI have no translator, so they call Mosaic, call us, because we have Vietnamese speaker and Chinese speaker. That's how we got involved. First, just to provide translation in services, but then afterward, we were able to house, because we already had a shelter for domestic violence then, of these victims, and started provide some services for these 18 victims. And and that's how we started our human trafficking service program in around 2001. What did we do for this group? We called them the Samoan group, because we have lawyer, and according to the Service to Victim of Trafficking Protection Act, we provide apply for the T visa. So all of the victims were able to get the T visa, would allow them legal status and stay here. And eventually they were able to obtain the green card, were employed, and some actually end up own their own business related to probably sewing and things like that, because these they used to work in the government business. Some of the victim has gone to Hawaii to testify at the trial of that trafficking. Some of the survivor ended up also after the case was resolved, they spoke at trafficking conferences and some fundraising events for Mosaic as well. And eventually some of these actually were able to obtain derivative visa for family reunification for their family. All right, these after that case, and when we provided the services to this group, our trafficking services expanded, has grown, and we received a lot of other groups, over the course of the last 20 years or so, some of whom were sex trafficking, and most of our cases are laborers. So what we do there, we provide outreach and awareness campaign. We have case manager who provide case management. We have the multicultural legal assistant for both family immigration law, similar to domestic violence. We provide trauma-informed counseling and therapy. We collaborate with law enforcement to identify and assist for survivors. We provide transitional housing after they have stay at the shelter and you'll be able to move on to the next phase. We also join and facilitate some anti-trafficking task forces that still exist until today. Our trafficking work was pretty well known. In 2018, we were selected and awarded an FBI Director Leadership Community Leadership Award. This picture was taken at the headquarters of the FBI. The man, the African-American man here, and he's the local SAC, service in charge agent, and he and myself, my wife, and my assistant, Bill Bernstein, his wife, and another lawyer, head of our legal department there, and of course me and my wife in front of the signal. The director of the FBI was there, and he provided, he gave us the award. There were probably around, if I recall correctly, around 49 agency or organization throughout the United States that received the Community Service Leadership Award. What sorts of funding do we have to that funds our services? Because we have mostly government grant. Department of Human Services provide grant for outreach. Department of Justice with probably the primary source of grant that provide both legal services and case management, as well as task force grants. And then the state through the Governor Office and Criminal Justice Division, where they also have grant that provides services for survival of human trafficking. Of course, a lot of our funding come from private foundation. We have individual donor, and of course, we do a lot of fundraising to support our work. The city group, this is the picture where I went and received one of the grant from the foundation, city foundation. So a lot of corporate have foundation, and they came and volunteer. Also, they raise money or through their employee campaign and distribute some of this money through different groups, and we receive one of their grant there. I don't know if you're aware that, but we joined the North Texas Giving Day, which is a fundraising event in September of every year. This is a campaign that we do back in 2018. It's still blurry, but you may recognize the man in the middle is Mark Cuban, the owner of the Mavericks. He really is a fan of Mosaic. The Maverick Foundation has given several grants to Mosaic to serve trafficking victims and domestic violence and so forth. So lastly, this is me, and I have to, again, I have a set example. So why do I donate to Mosaic? So I donate to Mosaic to give hope to survivors of human rights abuses, which means that refugee, survivor of domestic violence and human trafficking. That concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. I'd like to take any question at this time.
Thank you very much, Walter. Thank you for sharing your personal story. It is horrific as well as inspiring, and I'm sorry that you had that lived experience, but the light that you brought to the community is obviously immense. And I appreciate that you were able to transition from that trauma to the giving that you had to do. And I'm just overwhelmed with what you did in the community to help refugees, those who have suffered domestic violence and those who have suffered in human trafficking. And to have that lived experience, you were able to bring authenticity and your voice to it. So thank you so much for doing that for humanity. I'm honored to be able to meet you, although virtually. Thank you for spending time with us to tell us of the victories that Mosaic Family Services have brought to being. I appreciate that. All right, so questions. We have time for questions. I see Robin has a question. Yes. Go ahead, Robin.
I just would love to know have you always had really good cooperation from the, police department, obviously the FBI, yes, the schools, all the organizations with whom you'd have to interact in Dallas? Has it been a really good working relationship?
Yes, we do have had a very good collaboration from the police department, not just Dallas, but Arlington and Fort Worth as well. One of our grants from the Department of Justice is the task force grant. Is in collaboration with 3 police departments. Fort Worth, Dallas, and Arlington. So I remember, we have a memorandum of understanding where the police chief or both of, all of those departments and myself, we have to sign that. But particularly like when the police, like there's a vice unit at the Dallas Police Department, they conduct raid here and there. And they always bring Mosaic staff as part of when they conduct the raid. And the reason is this: for example, several times they have raided the massage parlors in the Harry High district, for example, in Dallas. That's where they have discovered and rescued sex trafficking victim. And so if they have a suspicion that there might be some illegal activity going on out there, and they suspect there may be trafficking survivor or victim working there, what they do is bring Mosaic, not as an investigator, but we go there and stay side by side. And after the raid, and they brought all the people that are arrested first out there, they would offer first the opportunity to come to Mosaic if for shelter and something like that. So yeah, we work very closely with the department, and we have some help. If we know something, we can call them, and we can always get them to come with us. Yeah.
Other questions? All right. Well, Walter, thank you very much for your time again. We really appreciate it. And you are welcome to stay if you want. We chat for about 15 minutes socially after the end of the meeting. You're welcome to stay for that if you wish. Otherwise, it was really nice to meet you. I appreciate your time.
Right. Thanks for your time as well.
And